Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market, here to a follow-up video to the video I did on my main channel, The Rogue Deck Builder, about the Pioneer leak. So I'm just going to go over this just very quickly, then get into 10 cards that I think are good specs if Pioneer is what we think it is. So first of all, Pioneer. Pioneer was leaked in what we call this Wizards Event Reporter. It's what local game stores use to report their events. It also does have a little bit of arena code in here of all the formats that are currently being played in arena. And this is interesting enough that Pioneer, it looks, has been added to both arena as well as the Wizards Event Reporter as a format. And it has the exact same codes that Modern has, meaning that Pioneer is not a casual format. It's not a draft, so it's not a limited. It is a one player, and it is currently active is this keyword, meaning that I think it's going to be activated quite quickly. And this, of course, casual equals false, means it's going to be probably an REL format, a sanctioned format, 1-versus-1 format, meaning that they will probably push this at the Mythic championships in the future, or for qualifiers, or for any sort of Grand Prix, what they call it, Magic Fest, those type of events. So I think they're adding this to their arsenal. Gavin Verhey and some of the other Wizards people have stated that they feel that Modern has been going on for long enough that there needs to be another format to bridge the gap between Modern and Standard. I fully agree with that sentiment, because I too do not like the Modern format. I think it's too degenerate. I think there aren't enough viable cards in the format. It's very expensive, and therefore I think there is room for another format. Where that starting point is the big what if. I've stated this in videos in the past that I do think it's going to be Shadows forward, because it makes the most sense, because that is what's currently coded into Arena, is all Shadows forward cards. And I think it's a good starting point in Magic in general, because it misses the fetch lands, and it misses some of the Battle for Zendikar colorless type stuff too. So it's a good format. A lot of people say we need to go even further and start maybe like Hour of Dev or Amonkhet, and therefore we get rid of Kaladesh. But I don't know if that is exactly where we want to be started, because it's too recent. So Shadows seems to be about the right point. Some of the other threads that I've seen on like Reddit and Facebook have suggested that the starting point should be Return to Ravnica. Supposedly there's a leak that it's Return to Ravnica forward. I cannot find any evidence anywhere. What I have found evidence though is this leak of the Pioneer format. I was able to verify it on my end. This is my document you're seeing in front of you that we ripped right out of the folder that is on anyone's computer with a Wizard Event Reporter can find this offline Event Reporter file, and actually just do a Control F and find Pioneer here. And it was added recently within the past couple, I would say last week. So that's the no information we have about it. And then it's all up in the air of speculation of what this format is going to be. I think that Historic is still going to be a thing for Arena, but I think Historic is going to be specifically like a more fun format where they bring in cards like Gristlebrand. I think they'll even bring in legacy cards like Channel. It's going to be a very wacky, wide open format where they bring very powerful cards that people can use and abuse on Arena, but then they need a more legit format that makes rotated cards actually playable, meaning all the cards that Rivals of Ixalan or Ixalan 4 that just rotated, that people are rotting in people's collections and have no way to play them, those need a format to be played in. I think that's what Pioneer is going to be focused on. However, with this being confirmed as a Wizards Event Reporter format, it took forever for Pauper to go from casual to actual competitive in the Wizards Event Reporter. The fact that it's starting as a non-casual format to me seems to be there's going to be a paper equivalence to it, or it's actually going to be supported in paper. So anyway, the best way to pull data on what cards will probably be good in this format, whether it be recent or Shadows of Innistrad forward, you can come over here to these MTG Frontier. They'll give lists of all of they do these internal tournaments. So this is Reddit /r/MTG Frontier, and they have just a plethora of data of decks that have done well. And I've put together a list of recent cards that I think have been performing well and still make sense, even if it is like Ixalan forward or Shadows forward, that they'll continue to perform well, and they should be investable targets because they'll survive like that decay after rotation. Well, actually, some of them that have rotated, I think will spike back up in value because there will be new demand for these cards. So without further ado, let's go on to 10 cards that I think are great in this Pioneer, suspected Pioneer format. The first I'm going to lump together with Teferi and Narset. They're both very, very recent here, and they have stabilized off. Teferi sees a lot of play in Modern. It sees a lot of play in Standard right now, and I think it will be a powerhouse in this Pioneer. I'm not going to focus too much on either Teferi nor Narset because it's very known information. They're still in Standard. In my opinion, they're still overvalued because it's War of the Spark. It's going to continue to get opened, and this is a hefty, hefty price tag for a rare out of a set that's been opened so much. Moving on to a rotated card, I was very surprised by this one, that Benlish Marshall Weenie decks do quite well in Frontier, just flooding out the board and having Benlish Marshall be your Anthem effect on a creature a lot of times can overwhelm the 1-for-1 type format. There are sweepers in this format. There's a lot of Deafening Clarions, there's a lot of Languishes, there's a lot of other board wipe type cards, but it still seemed to be a good format to run out, 1-drop, 2-drop, or 1-drop, 2 1-drops, and then Benlish Marshall and swing for a lot of damage. And then you can follow it up with some Planeswalker damage in the form of Gideon, which we'll be talking about later on. And so this one did surprise me. It saw a lot of play in this in-between format we call Frontier. It's at a price point that is very, very low. It was out of the Challenger decks, though. It's going to be a theme of this video. A lot of these cards are in Challenger decks, so Challenger decks seem to be a viable sealed product to invest in if this format is legit. Currently, I can still get both Challenger decks from this year and last year from distributors at the exact same cost that we are always able to get them. So the supply of those are still quite high, but I think those will dry out very, very quickly if this format does take off. And most of those Challenger decks will be very easily upgradable to be decks that are playable in this format. Next one that also surprised me is Mastermind's Acquisition. This card sees a ton of play in various black control decks or even like Dimir control decks. I guess being able to tutor up a specific answer to any specific threat or get one outside the game is a very, very powerful effect in this Frontier format. Someone who plays Frontier can explain in the comment section below. However, there were many, many deck lists with this card. The price point makes sense because I think this card is going to go up anyway because it is just it's a tutor. It sees play in EDH. So this is kind of the theory that I've had with Frontier. I didn't lose money on my Frontier specs. I didn't lose money on my Shadows over Innistrad specs because I targeted specific ones that double dipped, whether they saw play in Commander or they saw play in Modern, they were safe picks. So those are the ones you really want to focus on. I think Mastermind's Acquisition is one that it absolutely hits that sweet spot, that it's not going to go down much further regardless if there's not a format that actually supports it, because it still does see play in Commander at a high level. Going on to the next one, which is in 2 Challenger decks, is Soulscar Mage. This card has already started to go up in value because it does see quite a bit of play in Modern. It did hurt from the Faithless Looting banning, but it's still pretty decent. And the decks are still there. There's still Arclight Phoenix that works without Faithless Looting, and there's even some Wizards decks that work with the Soulscar Mage. So that's where I'm liking Soulscar Mage. It was in many of the Atarka Red list. It was in a lot of the Is It Wizards lists, and there even were some like mono red aggro that were based upon Wizards Lightning. And Soulscar Mage, of course, is going to be your go-to wizard for that 1-drop, get you Lava Runner and Soulscar Mage. And therefore, this one being the rare, I think it's a very, very smart pickup because mono red is going to be a thing. It's always going to be a thing. It's very well supported, even if it doesn't go back to Battle for Zendikar with like Light Up the Stage and like Risk Factor or the plethora of other ways to refill up your hand. Red is a very, very strong color for card draw right now in the history of Magic. So this particular card that gets a buff off of casting spells and is a great little 1-drop also has the effect of permanently killing your opponent's creatures with multiple burn spells, like dumbing them down in a turn, seems to be pretty legit. So I like Soulscar Mage as a possible pickup. This one is currently in War of the Spark. It's dipped down a little bit with Dreadhorde Arcanist, but this one also saw a ton of lists with Wizards as well as in the Feather decks. Feather seems to be performing quite well in the Frontier format, which is a good sign because it's competing with cards like Siege Rhino. It's competing with cards like Dig Through Time. This is a powerful format with powerful cards, collect company, fetch lands, all the like Kolgan's commands and all the other commands. So Dreadhorde Arcanist being able to compete in this environment is saying a lot about this card, and it has a lot of synergy with those cards that do like pump it up and be able to cast a spell. I'm actually looking to break this card with the Royal Scions right now in Standard. I think it's very well positioned, a nice little curve with after 1-drop opt or shock turn 2 Dreadhorde Arcanist, turn 3, you can pump its power up to cast 2-drop, or you want to use the loot effect with the Royal Science, but then later on you can use a +2 to get the ability of actually casting things you've looted. I think that's going to be a pretty decent card when we get more cards in Standard. So going back into this format that goes even further back, I think this is a smart pickup. It's powerful enough for Legacy, Modern. It's going to be in this sort of format. Next up, this is another card that seems to be in almost every black deck that can play it with this Gifted Aetherborn. It is just a card that must be answered with if they're aggro. So aggro needs to get rid of it before they can really get through. It's a huge roadblock. And it's also in Vampires. Vampires is a very, very represented theme in the format right now. And we'll talk about that card in a second, which has a very, very good price point. But this just seems to be the great little filler here for the 2-drop slot for black. And there hasn't been really anything to replace it throughout the time period of Return to Ravnica till now. So it's very, very powerful in this sort of slot. Next up, we have Spirits. So this one's kind of a risky one. You just have to decide whether or not they go back to Shadows over Innistrad. If they do, Shadows has enough cards. It does suffer a little bit without going the Coco Spirits route, but it does have enough cards to just go fully into Spirits if we go Shadows over Innistrad forward. You have the Selfless Spirit. You have some cards out of Core 2019 and Core 2020 that added to the Spirit Tribe. We had a lot of Spirits even come out more recently that could go in this particular shell, and this is the most powerful one out of them. The Spell Queller, it's the whole reason to be running Spirits, in my opinion, because it's just such a tempo shift of going Spell Queller. We have a big Flash theme going on in Standard right now. I don't think it'd be that big of a stretch to go into Bant Flash with Spell Queller into the, what is that, Wolf that comes into play as a 4/4. Seems to be pretty good, and the mana base is going to be good regardless of how far we go back, because we do have Shocklands currently. So Shocklands with Checklands, which is just going back to Dominaria, is almost perfect mana right there. If we get Shocklands in there, then we have really, really good mana. So Spell Queller, if we go back that far, I think it's going to be a powerhouse in the format. Next up, we have Gideon Blackblade. This seemed to be in almost every white deck, even the control white decks, like white-red Planeswalker decks. There was like a legendary Celestia deck that Gideon Blackblade was in, the white weenies it was in. It was in many sideboard cards. It seems to be a pretty decent card because if it does have that high loyalty that it gets right off the bat. It can turn one of your creatures into indestructible lifelink to get in for some more damage that particular turn, and then turns into a 4/4 beater that has a lot of resilience to removal base effects, or again, they have to spend something usually higher over curve to take care of this 3-drop, and then you leave yourself open for other things. So in the white weenie decks, very represented. In the mid-range decks, very represented. In the control decks, very represented. For that reason, I think this card is going to be good long-term if there is a format. This one's just good. Does it see Modern play at the moment? I think I did see some list. No, it doesn't look like it is seeing Modern play, and not seeing a lot of Standard play at the moment either. But again, going back with more aggressive cards, and even in a format with more mid-range control, this seems to be the perfect card. That leaves us with Soren Imperious Bloodlord as kind of the mythic that I really like for the price point right now. This is the lowest price that Soren's ever been, and I was surprised at how many white-black vampire lists were competing in the Frontier format. So if it can compete with Atarka Red, there are some great... Let's see if we can actually find one here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So white-black vampires. So here's a white-black vampires with Soren as a 4-of in the Frontier format. So you get to get... This seems to be just recently rotated. It doesn't really seem to be adding much. Adrena, Liberator of Malachor, and Gifted Aetherborn, really the only ones that they're adding from, further down sets. So this one is very good with the... If you really think that it's going to be a more recent rather than going back further, and if even we go back even further, there's even more vampires to abuse with Soren, and so it continues to look even better and better and better as a card, as it has so many different options to go with it. I mean, go back to like Kalitas. Kalitas is a pretty good thing to ramp out on turn number 3 after Soren. So go Soren to Kalitas. This thing is just a nightmare to deal with, and then starts generating those zombie tokens like crazy. So I like this Soren. There were many, many lists of people running these white-black vampires on the subreddit throughout their different seasons they've run. So again, price point is the main reason I like Soren Imperious Bloodlord. I think this one's going to last the test of time. I actually think that Soren is powerful enough for Modern, and for that reason, I think it's a pretty good buy going into these kind of the speculation going into the Pioneer format. Last but not least, the Braid. a braid, a braid, a braid, a braid. I'm kicking myself too because I've unloaded so many braids in the past year just because I thought it was going to do exactly this. You see how it's been flatlined forever. So if we even go back, let me refresh this. It should give us some better price. Yeah, price history here. It has just been flat. I don't like sitting on cards like this that aren't moving up. It does see play in Commander occasionally, not as much as other Destroy Artifact type cards. It does see play in Modern, and for that reason, I just thought there's too much supply with the promo that I unloaded these braids. But if there's going to be a format that adopts even clear back to Ravnica, return to Ravnica forward, a Braid is going to be an absolute powerhouse because it deals with those broken artifacts as well as a very versatile removal spell. So there are very few scenarios where this is going to be a bad card because most decks, the vast majority of decks, are going to be running something that can be killed with 3 damage to a creature or destroying an artifact. So Braid could be that uncommon that goes kind of like how the Veil is right now. It goes up to $3, $4, or $5 if the format does take off. So bust out those braids. Don't be selling them off like I've been doing. And it is my number one for double up if the format is a legit format. And I hope you enjoyed this list. There are plenty of others. You can kind of scroll through these other lists. I didn't want to pick a lot of cards that go back a long ways. So there are tons of different like Atarkas. So I avoided like Kaladesh cards, even though I personally think that it's, you know, going back to Shadow of Innistrad. I avoided cards that I think could be on the pre-ban list. That's one of the reasons I think that this is also coinciding with the ban list is coming out tomorrow, is I think there will be a pre-ban list if this is being a format. So Battle for Zendikar, before I avoided those, but there's some good little targets even in that era. I mean, Eldrazi tend to do pretty good. A lot of cards from the Coco era tend to do pretty good in this format, and it's just worthwhile to come over here to the MTG Frontier subreddit and kind of scroll through those different deck lists. I hope you enjoyed this video of the Pioneer format. Let me know, and the link is in the description below what you think about this. Again, this is more tinfoil hat speculation. We don't know. All we have is a name and a format, like a format identity of what it's not going to be. It could be anything at this point, but this makes the most sense to me. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.